Welcome to True Drew Podcast, your source for all things Nancy Drew. I'm your host, Avery, and on this podcast, we'll discuss everything from the Nancy Drew books, to computer games, to movie adaptations, and TV shows. Nothing is off the table. So if you're a True Drew, you'll definitely want to tune in for this podcast. Hello, and welcome back to True Drew Podcast. So I have gotten a ton of messages over the last couple weeks, and actually the last month. So many of you guys have been excited for me to cover this game, but today, for this episode, we're going to be talking about the 10th Nancy Drew computer game, The Secret of Shadow Ranch, which is based on the 5th Nancy Drew book by the same title. So this game came out all the way back in 2004, so 22 years ago, which is insane. But I always like to discuss my memories of particular games. I know the last game, Danger on Deception Island, I said I remembered playing that at my great-grandmother's. She would make me pancakes. There's these distinct memories surrounding that game. And also, I just recently got to go on the Danger on Deception Island trip that was based in Seattle. And that was so much fun. I felt like I was living in that game. Look for an episode on that coming up soon. But as far as my memories go surrounding Secret of Shadow Ranch, I distinctly remember playing this game on the computer in my family's basement. Me and my brothers played it together, and several kids from our neighborhood came up, and we would just play these Nancy Drew games together, and this one in particular, we had a lot of fun with. Also, in case you were wondering on the exact release date for this game, it was July 20th, 2004, so we're not far off from that 22nd year anniversary. So, some fun facts about this game. It was based on one of the most popular books in the series, book number 5, The Secret of Shadow Ranch, the revised text. If you've ever read the original text for this book, it's completely different. There's no Francis Humber, Dirk Valentine, there's no Phantom Horse, no treasure. It was kind of a letdown for me the first time I read it. And this is also the first game to pull from one of the classic books. Secrets Can Kill, Stay Tuned for Danger, those were both Nancy Drew Files books. Message in a Haunted Mansion, Treasure in the Royal Tower, those were later paperback books. The Final Scene was another Nancy Drew Files book, and The Secret of the Scarlet Hand and Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake are also based on several later paperback books, as were The Haunted Carousel and Danger on Deception Island. So this is the first classic Nancy Drew book that we got a game from, because of course Secret of the Old Clock hasn't been made yet. I know we already did an episode for that on the podcast, but this game comes out 2 games after this one. I just decided to go out of order and cover that game when we were talking about the books that it was based on, because that game was based on Secret of the Old Clock, The Hidden Staircase, The Bungalow Mystery, and Mystery at Lilac Inn. Now, a couple more fun facts about this game. This is the first game to change formats. Nancy's cell phone and journal are in this one, and we get to use the internet web browser, so that was a big deal. Before this game, we had, I think, a PDA and Ghost Dogs, and then we got to use Nancy's laptop in Secret of the Scarlet Hand and Danger on Deception Island. Also, in case you were wondering, Nancy writes a letter to Hannah at the beginning of this game. Now, before we jump into discussing the game cover for this computer game, I thought it would be neat to discuss the main differences between the book and the game. So, Bess and George are stuck at the airport in the game, but they're present in the book. Mary Deer is a character in the book and is Mary Yazzie in the game, and she isn't with Tex in the book. Also, when reading the book, Tex is younger and he has red hair. He also doesn't have a sister named Jane Nash. That was an add-on for the game. Shorty and Miss Thurmond are combined into one character in the game. I think Miss Thurmond was the cook and Shorty was just a ranch hand. Now, Ed gets bit by a rattlesnake in the game. In the book, Nancy gets a rattle from a rattlesnake and a note in her purse. Nancy gets hit over the head and locked in a jail cell in the game, and in the book, she's locked in the tack room. One thing that happened in the game but didn't happen in the book, Mary tries to purchase land from the Raleighs. She never did this in the book. And we see more of Frances's relationship with her father, Merrill Humber, in the game. We don't get any of this in the book. And finally, Dave is more into Nancy in the game. In the book, he's just rude. Dave Gregory in the game is genuinely nice. In the book, he harasses Nancy while she's trying to make a cake in the kitchen. Even with a lot of these tweaks and changes from the book to the game, I feel like HerInteractive couldn't have picked a better book to base a game on. This is a fan favorite for a reason. Now, when it comes to discussing describing the game cover. I love it. There's a lot of purples and oranges. We have the phantom horse in the foreground. We can see the ranch in the background with a little windmill. There's cliffs, a starry night sky. I love this game cover. So if I had to give it a rating, I would give it a 5 magnifying glass rating. I would wear this if it was on a shirt. Okay, so now really quickly, I will give a list of characters that we encounter in this game. So first up is the one, the only, Dave Gregory. He's probably the youngest cowboy on the ranch. Tex Britton. He's probably the most prickly cowboy on the ranch. I would describe him as a cactus. He's not very friendly when you first meet him. Shorty Thurmond, who's the cook. Mary Yazzie, she has a little gift shop, which is a few miles away from the ranch. And the phone contacts we have in this game, we can call the Raleighs, Ed and Bet Raleigh, which are Bess and George's aunt and uncle, Bess and George, the Hardy Boys, so we get to call Frank and Joe in this game, Charlena Purcell, an author, and Sheriff Hernandez. We also get to call Geza, who works for the Southwest Geo something or other. He's over mineral deposits and such, and we call him at one point in the game. Okay, I'm gonna attempt to do some impressions, so brace yourself. Or maybe I should say hold on to your horses. So first up is Dave Gregory. Ma'am, do you have a steady back home? Tex Britton, if you last that long. Nope. Mary Yazzie, they rejected my offer. And Shorty Thurmond, you can pick more vegetables than that. You're crowding me here, Nancy. She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes. Shorty's yodeling is truly awful. But as far as the voice actors go for this game, Dave Gregory is voiced by Stephen Hando. Nancy is, of course, still voiced by Lonnie Manella. Tex is voiced by David Hogan. You may remember him as Brady Armstrong in the final scene. Mary is voiced by Amy Broomhall. Shorty, the mineral guy, the voice on the radio in the ranch's living room, and Charlena's assistant are all voiced by Jonah Von Spreeken. That guy is talented. Charlena Purcell is voiced by Julie Raleigh. Bess is voiced by Abby Murray. George is voiced by Patty Pomplin. Frank is voiced by Wayne Raleigh. I'm wondering if Wayne Raleigh and Julie Raleigh are related. Joe is voiced by Robert Jones. Ed Raleigh is voiced by John Nelson. Bet Raleigh is voiced by Shannon Kipp. Merrill Humber is voiced by Max Holcheck. And the sheriff and Dirk's voice are voiced by Gary Hoffman, and you may recognize that voice as Alejandro Del Rio in Secret of the Scarlet Hand. The voice actors are always so talented for these games, and I think it's cool how they reuse them in multiple games. So now really quickly, I'll read a synopsis for The Secret of Shadow Ranch. Nancy, Bess, and George are all set to visit Bess and George's aunt and uncle, Bet and Ed Raleigh, at their ranch in Arizona, Shadow Ranch. But plane delays keep Bess and George from arriving on time, and Nancy is taken to the ranch alone, where mysterious things keep happening. Rattlesnake bites, sabotage, and a phantom horse. Can Nancy solve the mystery? And how does an over 100-year-old forbidden romance factor in? Okay, so next up, let's talk about the real Easter eggs / allusions to other games that show up in this game. So the mineral deposit map has a reference to Sunny June. There's a place on it marked Sunny June Ridge, and there's also a reference to Cocoa Kringle bars. There's a place on the map called Kringle Mountain. We also find a Cocoa Kringle bar that falls out of Tex's saddle. There's a Golden Gazette newspaper in the den next to the fireplace, which is a direct reference to Message in a Haunted Mansion. We get to use that newspaper as kindling. And there's a book on the living room bookshelf called Tossing Squid and Other Rituals, alluding to the squid toss game in the Haunted Carousel. Now, I also like to bring up allusions to real life in these games. That's one thing that's really cool about the Nancy Drew games. We blend fiction and real life so well. Now, if you look at another bookcase in the living room, you can see these books called the Harvey Herring books, and these are a direct spoof off of the Harry Potter books. I think there's only 4 or 5 on the shelf, which matches up to how many Harry Potter books there were at the time this game was made in 2004. There's also a poster in the tack room that looks a lot like Tex, and it says, "Always check your girth before going riding on the trails," or something to that effect, but it really resembles an Uncle Sam poster. We also have a lot of allusions to bank robbers and outlaws. They're mentioned in some of the newspaper articles in this game, and the Pueblo cliff dwellings. I feel like this is just synonymous with the Wild West. There was a lot of gold found out there in the 1800s. There were a lot of bank robbers, people who would rob stagecoaches and trains. Think of Jesse James James, and the Pueblo cliff dwellings. I don't know a lot about the Western Native American tribes. In my part of the country, there's a lot of Cherokee influence, which is really cool, but I would love to learn more about that. Now on to the second chances that you can get in this game. There's quite a few. You can pick unripe or overripe vegetables, and Nancy will actually get sent home. Where was the justice in this? I always used to get so mad because I would pick the peas the wrong way. I mean, they all looked shriveled up. I was like, I don't know. Maybe these are bad. I don't know. But Nancy gets in way too much trouble for that. You can try to collect the angry hen's eggs, and it will peck you to death. You can give the horses or chickens food poisoning. Guilty. That was a really hard puzzle. I would mess that up so much, and I would think, oh, I got it right this time, and then when you walked away, you would hear the horse neighing and collapsing on the ground. Kind of traumatizing. If you don't get Tex's permission to go riding or you leave the saddle on Bob, you can get in trouble. If you push the key off the wall hook without pulling the chair up in the jail cell later in the game, straight to jail. You're done for. You can get caught by the villain at the end of the game, which is typically a second chance in most of the games. You can burn the kitchen down by baking the cake for too long or too hot. If you don't repair the chicken coop and the coyotes eat the chickens, you get in trouble. And you can also get stung by a scorpion or bitten by a rattlesnake. You can get bit by a rattlesnake in 2 separate locations in this game, near the garden where you pick the vegetables, which always would get me and always scare me, or near Zebra Rock at the trail stop. There's a lot of jump scares in this game. Okay, so now I think we're ready to jump into the direct quotes and notes that I took down for the Secret of Shadow Ranch game. I played this game just 3 or 4 days ago. I was talking about it on my stories, and I had so much fun replaying it. This is one of the more immersive games. Like, I've always wanted to go to a ranch. I have ridden horses before, but to get that full experience would be so cool. Maybe I should do that as my next trip. So of course, when this game starts, we have Nancy's Dear Hannah letter, and I always thought it was funny seeing Dave standing next to the luggage carousel with Nancy's luggage at the beginning of this game. The suitcase looks a lot like the one that I took on this recent Clue Crew trip, and it's kind of funny. This is all I could think about when I was in the airport. But when Little Miss Drew, that is her handle on Instagram, one of my friends traveled with me on this trip, when we were standing around waiting for our luggage to come around the luggage carousel, all I could think about was Dave just standing there in his chaps. And it was so funny because when this floral 90s suitcase came popping out, I actually heard someone say that was a cool suitcase, so that made my day. I hope you thought it was a cool suitcase. It was a pain in the neck, or should I say arm, to carry it around. It had no wheels. Back then, people must have been jacked because they were carrying these heavy suitcases around. But anyways, more on that later when I do an episode on the trip. But at the beginning of this game, when Nancy is reading off the letter, she says the Raleighs sold their clothing store. That's actually how they financed the purchase of the ranch. And it's also where Jane Nash, Tex's sister, worked. But I have a feeling they didn't sell any of Manette's clothing at their store. Can you imagine Manette making like Western fashion? I can kind of see it though. It might be kind of cool. But she would also have to add something weird like rabbit ears to it, I'm sure. If it's anything like her cruise wear, oh my gosh. Oh, I just got an image in my head of Prudence Rutherford wearing what would look like an armadillo costume. Or maybe like a cactus. Oh, that's canon now. That needs to be a thing. But basically, at the beginning of this game, Nancy gets to the ranch before Bess and George. And that is the continuing joke throughout the game. Whenever Nancy calls them, they're like, oh, we're in Omaha, Nebraska. Now we're having plane difficulties, and there's fog, so we never get to see Bess and George in the game. I think the first game we get to see them in is Ransom of the Seven Ships. I'm pretty sure. So that's very sad. I remember when I played this game for the first time, I was so disappointed. I was like, no, I wanted to see Bess and George. I understand why they didn't do it. I think HerInteractive was trying to build up everyone's anticipation for when we finally see them, and also, like, it would have been a lot extra to animate 2 more characters. But it was kind of funny to have this running gag, like Nancy calling them, and they were always getting further and further away from Shadow Ranch. But at the beginning of this game, I took Nancy's advice from the later game intros, and I poked around. And there's actually a newspaper next to the fireplace. I'd never really paid too much attention to it, but on this playthrough I was looking at it and it says Burnett Spammerwickle won the Tumbleweed Krusty Chitlin's Chili Cook-Off. Which, what a name. And also, Krusty Chitlin's Chili Cook-Off. That sounds
kind of gross. And there was a schnauzer on one of the newspaper articles, and it says it was abducted from someone's yard and the owners think aliens did it. I just love how HerInteractive adds these really wild things in the things that you can read in the games. Every time you replay a game, you catch something different. I also love the overall look of the ranch's decor in this game. The Navajo blankets, the rugs and wooden furniture, all the southwestern touches are so beautiful. It would be so cool to stay in a place like that. But I think I also made a lot of phone calls in the first 5 minutes of this game. I called Bess and George, I called the Raleighs, and they are at the hospital because Ed got bitten by a rattlesnake in his and Bet's room. We can also go gossip with Shorty the cook about the phantom horse and talk to Dave and Tex. And Dave will give us the key to the roll-top desk so we can get the letter to take to Mary Yazzie from the Raleighs. And then when we talk to Tex, he's not very friendly, but he tells us we need to take some tests and do some chores before we can go riding anywhere. So we have to report to Shorty, and we have to pick vegetables, build a fire, chop some wood, and collect some eggs. And it's very funny to me because this is such a beloved game, but there are a lot of chores. But then I've also heard from people that they don't like games like White Wolf of Icicle Creek and Trail of the Twister because of the chores. Now, picking the vegetables, even if you do look at the web browser on your phone because there's a thing that will help you pick the vegetables, it's still kind of tricky. Even with that, sometimes I would still mess up. But I genuinely don't mind the chores in this game. I think they're fun. But I went and gathered all the kindling and the twigs and cut the wood and made a fire, collected all the eggs. I had to fix the basket because it breaks and then you have to pick up the eggs again. Basically, I ran around and did all these chores for Shorty. That one rogue chicken in the chicken coop always cracks me up, though. I remember testing it because there's a sign that says, "Hey, you, don't pick up my eggs when I'm sitting in this basket because I'll attack you," or that's kind of paraphrasing, but if you click that chicken's little nest, there's like a close-up and it's just pecking Nancy in the face. It's kind of scary. But also, I think it's funny when you bring Shorty the eggs. The way he says eggs, he's like, "Eggs? I need those eggs, Nancy." But finally, after we do all those chores, we can go riding. And we get to look at the horses. There's Bob, Ace, and Clyde. We ride Bob. I would have to make the argument that Bob is probably one of the most beloved animals in the Nancy Drew games. He's high on everyone's list. He's just so cute. But at this point, I went to see Mary Yazzie, and she was not happy about the letter I brought from the Raleighs. She apparently wanted to buy a parcel of property from them, but they rejected her offer. But another key component to this, Mary Yazzie is Native American. I'm not sure what tribe she's supposed to be from, but we're supposed to suspect her because of this, because she's mad at the Raleighs, she wants this land. It's painted as being very suspicious, like why does she want it? And we don't figure out why she wants the land till later. And I feel like they do this a lot in the games. They have different motives for different people, and Nancy suspects almost everybody at some point. Mary's shop is very cool, though. I love the music that plays in her shop. While we're there, we can look around at arrowheads and jewelry, and we get to play this Roadrunner and Coyote game, which has the most obnoxious music known to man. It's like this heavy bumping banjo music, which it's not as loud as the Bee's Knees game in the final scene. If you know, you know. That blasted my eardrums out as a kid. But this banjo music is just like, and it just keeps repeating on a loop. And you're just like, oh, I wish I could save this Roadrunner because I cannot hear this song one more time. But it also makes me tap my foot a little bit. It's a conundrum. What can I say? It's the song of my people. But finally, if you win this game, you get a piece of Dry Creek script, this little coin that we can use in a gambling machine later. Or well, I should say slot machine. HerInteractive would not approve of gambling, I'm sure. Or marketing that to young children. I think actually later in the game when Nancy talks to Charlena Purcell about it and she's like, "You mean like gambling?" And Charlena's like, "Well, no, not exactly." But directly after this, I called Frank and Joe, and they're apparently working for some guy and trying to locate his laptop for him, but he's being really annoying. I just love these side conversations and side plots with the other characters. But the next note that I wrote down is the Francis Humber and Dirk Valentine lore is so good. It's crazy to think that this is only in the revised text for the book and not the original text. Whoever added that element and the phantom horse element to the story was a genius. Maybe it was Harriet Stratmeyer Adams. Another thing that I took note of on this playthrough, Charlena Purcell's author picture does not look a thing like she does in Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, which I know they used like a real person's picture, but where's the scrunchie? Where's the tortilla skirt? That obviously comes later. I also thought it was funny that her assistant sounds like a surfer dude. The way he talks, he's like, Charlena Purcell's office. But after this, I got into the trunk at the Raleighs and I was able to find Merrill Humber's diary and a note from Dirk to Frances and a pocket watch with a picture of Merrill and Frances Humber inside of it. I also got into the trunk at Mary's around the same time and I found another watch with another picture of Frances, and on the back of that picture it says green bottle under. I also rode Bob around to some of the various locations and I found some arrowheads and petroglyphs. But then we get our first cutscene in this game. We get to hear Shorty's truly atrocious singing at the campfire, and Tex and Dave dog his singing and his cooking. It's funny because Shorty gets frustrated when they walk off, and then he walks off and starts muttering about uncultured swine not appreciating his cooking and how he'll have a cooking show one day. And the thought of Shorty having a cooking show is just hilarious to me. I can see it now. Yeehaw! Welcome to Shorty Thurman's kitchen, where we're going to be making some rattlesnake lamb ragu today. I hope you got all the fixins. We're going to need some buttermilk, some ground chuck, and we're going to make some corn fritters. Just picture Shorty Thurman on the Food Network. But right after he leaves the campfire, we see the phantom horse run by and we see the water explode from the pump house. So we have to talk to the sheriff the next day before we can look in there. And according to the sheriff, Dave has been talking about us. So this is the first inkling that maybe Dave Gregory has a crush on Nancy Drew. But when we go into the pump house, things are all over the place. They got washed off of the shelves and we find a passageway. So when we go through that passageway, we find Dave. He's poking around under the stairs in the secret room, but he tells us he has a photo and it has the other half of the message that we need to find. It says under stairs, so the complete message is green bottle under stairs. But according to Dave, he's been looking for this treasure that Dirk Valentine was rumored to have left for Frances Humber. Frances never found it, so it's somewhere still out there, probably on the ranch's property. But he says he isn't behind the sabotage with the phantom horse. Nancy tries to talk to him a little bit more, but then he slips off almost like he's embarrassed or he doesn't want to be in the room alone with us. But after he leaves, you're able to find the green bottle under the stairs, and there's another note from Dirk to Frances inside. So a little further backstory on Dirk Valentine and Frances Humber. Dirk was this outlaw, and Frances's father, Merrill Humber, was the sheriff in town. So I think you see where this is going. Daddy Humber did not want Frances seeing Dirk. And the ranch property is where the Humbers used to live. We can actually see a picture of Frances Humber in the living room of the ranch. And I think Bet tells us that she found it in the tack room under some things. But Dirk Valentine and Frances were like star-crossed lovers. They wanted to be together. And when you read the diary that Merrill wrote all these entries in, you can see him trying to keep them from having that relationship. And he fails. Dirk gets in trouble with the law. I think he's actually hung. And Frances refuses to talk to her father ever again. It's actually really sad. You can see Merrill Humber's tear stains on the last pages of the diary entries. They also narrated the letters and the diary entries in this game, which I think is so cool. We don't see that, I don't think, in any of the other games. And it adds this emotional element. But I also think it's neat that Dirk basically had this scavenger hunt for Frances to find this treasure. It's definitely a case of Frances loving the bad boy, but you've got to admit it's still kind of a romantic story. But after this, I was able to snoop through Shorty's stuff because he wasn't at his normal post. He's not standing by the stove for once. And we can see that he has a map of mineral deposits in the area. Very sketchy. He also catches us doing this, and it's very awkward because he's just like, "Can I help you?" But Shorty says he was just hoping to find a gold mine or two in the area on his off hours. Right. Honestly, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think this is way more sketchy than Mary Yazzie wanting to buy a parcel of land from the Raleighs, because we don't even know why she wants it. Spoiler alert, later it turns out she's just wanting it because there's petrified wood in the area. She uses that in her shop and I think she sells it. Meanwhile, we have Shorty actually confessing to wanting to find gold. Case closed. But after this, I had to go do all the regular chores again. I picked the vegetables, I got the eggs, and then Dave wants us to fix the chicken coop later that night because he has to run an errand and he won't be there to do it. But we're also able to talk to Dave a little bit more. He shows us this letter between Frances and her cousin Ellie, I think it is, who is a great aunt or something of Dave's, so he's distantly related to the Humbers. But the person who narrates the voice of Frances reading the letter, I'm pretty sure it's the same person who voiced Joy in the Haunted Carousel. Directly after this, I also called Bess and George again, and they kept getting further away, and they were in St. Louis, which is nowhere near Arizona. And then Shorty wanted me to bake a cake for Tex's birthday. I love making the Shadow Ranch cake. It's so fun. You get to mix up the ingredients, and you put the food coloring on the flour. But we're going by this old recipe of Frances Humber's, and there's no temperature listed, and there's no size pan listed, so we have to kind of guess. I also thought this was really cool because the cake in the game is vanilla based, and in the book, Nancy makes a chocolate cake. So HerInteractive just included so many details from the book, and I thought that was so neat. I also love that you can see the desert and the canyons out the window while you're baking. And I didn't know this. So the day after you make the cake, I think it's like day 3 maybe, you can actually eat a slice of it. You can make Nancy click on the cake and she'll try the cake. I didn't know this until Carter, who is the Nancy Drew Times on Instagram, posted this, and my mind was blown. So next time you replay, have Nancy eat a slice of the cake. But after I did this, we had to do some barrel racing and lassoing, which was really fun, so we can get a lariat from Tex, which comes in handy for getting up on the ledge at Cougar Bend, where all the petroglyphs are. We also get to feed the chickens and the horses. And like I said earlier, this puzzle was so hard for me to figure out as a kid. I was like, I killed the chickens and the horses way too many times. But as we ride off from the ranch, we see Mary Yazzie and Tex riding together. Ooh la la. Or, in the words of Fatima from Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, well, hot dang if that don't beat all. Of course, Tex denies it if you bring it up with him. He's like, you didn't see nothing. But then when you go to Mary Yazzie, you can basically trick her into telling you. And you can say, oh yeah, Tex told me all about, you and him. And she's kind of shocked at first, but then she starts to spill. But then as you keep talking to her, she figures out you actually didn't know anything at all. You were bluffing, and she's like, oh, you're a sneaky one. Which it's so interesting. There's so many romance elements in this game. Because, of course, you're talking to Charlena Purcell in this game as well, the author of, Wind Through My Heart and all the other countless romance novels she writes. So you've got the fictional romances going. Then you've got the very real romances of Dirk Valentine and Frances Humber in the past, Mary Yazzie and Tex Britton in the present, and then Dave is kind of flirting that line with Nancy, so it's very interesting. But at this point, I went out to Dry Creek, which is cool. It's this creepy old ghost town. And it used to scare me so much when you would see the fluttering in that upper window of one of the buildings and hear the rocks falling. You just know that somebody is watching Nancy. And I think I also talked to Charlena Purcell after this, and we get some more info. We learn that Dirk Valentine's dad was a blacksmith, and apparently Dirk fell for Frances when he overheard her playing the piano at Cappy's, which is very sweet. But after this, I called the SWGO service and talked to Geza about Shorty's requesting the mineral deposit map. He can't tell us too much other than the fact that yes, he requested it. And then I called the sheriff to get the lock combo for the ghost town building that's locked. The sheriff is like, oh, I had it locked so tourists wouldn't go poking around, but if you promise to be careful, I'll let you have the code. And then I think I also talked some more to Bess and George and Frank and Joe. So I went to look in the building that was locked in the ghost town, and we're able to see the slot machine, some engineering books, a cracker tin, a piano, and someone's sleeping bag. So someone has been staying there. And I think after this I got into the piano, I found all the 10 arrowheads for Mary, so I could borrow the tuning forks from her, got the name of the crackers from Charlena, and solved the tuning fork puzzle to get the note about Zebra Rock. So we're kind of piecing together all these little notes from Dirk to Frances, this scavenger hunt that he left her. After that, I went back to the ranch and I had to fix the chicken coop, and that's when Nancy notices that her gloves are glowing from this phosphorescent powder that she picked up off the books in the ghost town. And it's glowing, so it has to be the same thing that's on the Phantom Horse. And about that time, speak of the devil, the Phantom Horse shows up, and this time a transformer blows on a telephone pole. Now the next morning, Shorty is beside himself and Nancy tells him to calm down. She's like, it's not that big of a deal. Shorty is like, I'm surprised you're still here, Nancy. He really wants us to leave for some reason. But after this, I also made some phone calls and I found a very real horseshoe out in the courtyard of the ranch. Phantom horses don't have real horseshoes, so this is very interesting. And Dave is not around. He is just mysteriously gone. But after he comes back, Dave asks if Nancy has a steady back home. Now, this was probably one of the most, if not the most, pivotal moments in the Nancy Drew games for most of us as teenage girls. When I played this for the first time, I was like, Ned who? I wanted Nancy so badly to say no to that question. But of course, I think Nancy's only options are, well, that depends on why you want to know, or she can talk about Ned. And then Dave just kind of blushes and bumbles off. And I felt so bad for him. I think if you were to poll the fandom, a lot of people had crushes on Dave Gregory. Probably still do. But after that heartbreaking moment, I also was able to go back to the ghost town to try and find the powder residue on the books, but the books are gone. And then Nancy gets knocked over the head, and we wake up in the jail cell. So we have to use our lariat to lasso the chair and get the key and escape the jail cell. And we can also see a tally mark puzzle on the wall that I think you can come back and do later. But I also, so on this recent playthrough, I forgot all about the little purse that you're supposed to grab in the secret room where you encounter Dave. But I went back and got that, and then Bess and George got me the bead pattern. And then we can go get the beads from Mary Yazzie. We have to do this puzzle for her. I love organizing the jewelry for her. It's so relaxing. But after this, I solved some more various puzzles, the flower box. I got the ring from Dave. No, not that kind of ring. He went to Jared. No, it's the ring for the slot machine in Dry Creek. And then I used the key to open the ballerina box, got into Zebra Rock. Not all in that order. And I found the note under the bank lamp after deciphering the tally puzzle in the jail cell. You also get this agate, and you get to go find the tree that matches the agate, which is at Cougar Bend, or no, it's at the trail stop. And then you can trace all the petroglyphs into the shape of a V. And eventually at the end, we find Valentine's treasure, the one that was meant for Frances. And it's all these gold hearts, which is just heartbreaking that she didn't find them. Dirk went over the top. I mean, no offense to the Russian influencers that just scaled the Empire State Building and the guy proposed to the girl, but Dirk Valentine's where it's at. Like, he made this scavenger hunt for Frances, and it had all these clues, and it included places where they had met, and places that reminded him of her. Just, so heart-wrenching. But then, shortly after finding this treasure, Shorty appears below us in this maze, this labyrinth that we had to go through to get to where the treasure is. And he's so creepy. He scared me so much when I first played this game. It's so much worse when he catches you, because I think he, strangles you. That's what most of the villains seem to do to Nancy. But as he's trying to get to you, he's like, I went through another door, Nancy. Ugh. This is like the worst nightmare, when someone is just slowly coming after you. But we can switch these colored rocks over the doorways. This is so genius. But we can switch the red and green colored rocks because where the red rock is originally, there's this rug, and if we pull it up, we can see that it goes straight down. Like, Shorty will step through this hole and fall down onto this rock. So that's what Nancy does. We hide, and we're able to trap Shorty, thankfully. And that's the end of this game. Now, I did take down some funny quotes. One was Tex, and he says, "Which one are you?" And Nancy's like, "The nice one?" when they first meet. And then Shorty, when he wants to gossip, he's like, "Who do you want to talk about next?" And then his famous quote, "I cast my culinary pearls before you uncultured swine." The characters in this game are so good. But when it comes to the puzzles, I really like sorting the jewelry for Mary Yazzie. I like feeding the animals when I get it correct. Fixing the chicken coop, fixing the egg basket, all the scavenger hunt-like puzzles. There's so many great puzzles in this game. One puzzle that used to annoy me was the one at Zebra Rock when you have to use the magnets. But at least when you're playing in Junior Detective, because I always play in Junior Detective, if you flip the rock open and close 10 times and then go back, all of those blockers are gone, so you can see where the magnets clearly need to go. Just thought I would pass that along. But now let's talk about another favorite thing that I love to talk about on these game episodes, the music. The music for Shadow Ranch is so good. There's guitars, there's this western twang to all of it. There's even some electric guitars in some of the songs, but it's just all so good. I'm going to play you some of my favorite tracks. So this first song is called Ballad, and it usually plays around the house as you're going through the kitchen and the living room. This next one is called Drive, and usually you'll hear it when you're riding Bob around to the different places or you're doing the barrel racing. And this next track I think is called Desert or Desert Lands. I really like this one because there's some different elements. I'll play different parts of it for you. I love the drums and the flutes. But this next part, this is from the same track. This has kind of this new age quality to it, and I really enjoy that. For some reason, too, this song reminds me of Holes a lot, which Holes came out, gosh, I think around the same time, 2003. One of my favorite movies, by the way. But here's a snippet. The music for this game is so good. So if I had to give it a rating, I would give it a 5 magnifying glass rating. And when it comes to giving The Secret of Shadow Ranch a rating, I would give it a 5 magnifying glass rating also. It's such a good one. I'm glad that they picked this classic book to make a game off of because the story is just so great. I love when there's mysteries in the past and mysteries in the present that Nancy's trying to solve. But yeah, I haven't done an ultimate tier ranking of all my favorite games, but I would have to say that Shadow Ranch is definitely in the top 10 for me. It's just that good. I feel like you can't go wrong recommending this as a first game for people who have never played Nancy Drew before too, because they just won't be disappointed. There's romance, there's a mystery, adventure, history. It's got everything. But yeah, that concludes this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I have been wanting to talk about this game for a very long time. For the next episode of the podcast, we'll be jumping into another book, which should be book number 103. I think it's A Stranger in the Shadows. The Stranger in the Shadows. I was really close. But if you like stories about shoplifting, and I think Nancy and Bess are the only ones in this one. I don't think George shows up in this mystery, if I remember correctly. It also takes place in River Heights in the winter, so it's kind of cozy. So if you like mysteries like that, you definitely won't want to miss this episode. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of True Drew Podcast. Can't get enough of the podcast? Then check out my subscription series, True Drew Files, available on Apple and Spotify. For Nancy Drew books and merchandise, you can check out my website, www.truedrewpodcast.com. For business inquiries, you can contact me at truedrewpodcast@gmail.com, or you can connect with me on Instagram at True Drew Podcast.